Welcome to the creative community. I'm your host, David Starkey, and my guest this time is poet David Oliveira. David, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Well, you and I have known each other since the year 2000, I believe, and this is the first time that I've interviewed you on television, so it's really exciting for me to have you here. Okay. You're talking about your book and reading from your book, Still Life with Coffee. I don't know if you want to hold that up for the camera, published by Brandenburg Press in Santa Barbara. And you are the very first Santa Barbara Poet Laureate, and then shortly thereafter you moved to Cambodia, where you've lived since, some periodic visits, including this one. And I know that was a huge move, as it would be for anyone. You're from the Central Valley of California, and I think you have a poem, Coming to Cambodia, that sort of discusses a little bit about that process. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'd love to read it for you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
it. Coming to Cambodia. So much of my life stayed with the landscapes of California, my family in the thirsty sunrises of the great agricultural valley, my friends in the vast salt horizons of the Pacific coast. I arrived with Vic into a hot country of unrecognizable syllables and landscapes whose unpronounceable names had to be learned. All I wanted when we came here was a small piece of land on which to make a house, a home where we would belong, where we would navigate the woolly charms of old age together. We got that, most of it, for a while, and unexpectedly, a new family, 5 sons, their wives, all those adorable and adored grandchildren, 9. I never imagined living here without Vic. Couldn't have imagined it. My plan? Do nothing. Let the natural course of things take me out first, avoiding the need for decisions and all those loathsome paperwork. I've never had my name on this land, but it's mine, as much as anyone can call a piece of earth theirs. Other names have been written here, too many to count, even if someone had thought to keep a list. It's in my province now, for a while, my short while, and soon it will be someone else's. That's the point. This land, all land, belongs to no one and to everyone. The rules that build fences and walls over the ground change. They could fall in an instant and have many, many times. The ghosts never leave. They watch the blinding light bend to daybreak, caress the shade of mangoes during sweltering midday heat, and escape into moon's shelter at night. They watch without judgment and wait for us, quite soon, to join their patient vigils. I wake in the morning and look out the screen doors toward the river. On its surface, I can see the day forming, and by the color of light, know the kind of day nature plans. Behind me, a small one wakes cranky from her sleep. House animals signal their impatience with our slow attention. They've been up at their duties for hours, after all. What I don't see from here is what cannot be seen from here, the thing I most want to know. The ghosts keep silent, but one leans forward, the short one with a generous frame and even more generous smile, who touches my hand as if to say, "It's all right. Everything is all right."
Wow, yeah, and that is a great description of Vic, the even more generous smile. A few things arose in that poem that maybe people watching our show won't know about him. And you said 5 sons appeared, and can you tell me a little bit about that system in Cambodia of sort of adopting sons? How does that work?
Well, the lines of family are kind of fluid, and for one reason or another, somebody comes into your circle, and if they stay long enough, you form an attachment, and it becomes a family. That's kind of what happened to us. The first son was somebody I met in the countryside, a very poor area, and he was very clever, and he wanted to come to Phnom Penh to go to school. I felt rich at the time, and I thought I could finance his way to Phnom Penh and pay for his college education. Well, one thing led to another, and he stayed with us for a long time, and we became family. He calls me Daddy, which was a surprise to me, and he's married. He has one child who's really dear to me. So we're family, and then the other sons came one by one for various reasons.
Right. Well, another thing that you mentioned about is having a place without your name on the deed, and that's because, as I understand, Americans can't own land in Cambodia.
Foreigners can't own land,
Right.
but you can own 49% of something if you're in partnership with a Khmer citizen.
Okay.
So that wasn't our problem. Vic was a Khmer citizen and an American citizen,
So together you own the whole place. Yeah. But it's interesting how your take on that is to sort of step back and think that all land is transitory and all ownership is kind of,
Well, it certainly
it's
is.
true.
Look at the history of the world. Look at Ukraine now. We don't know how that's going to go down.
Right, yeah. I'd love to hear another poem about Cambodia. I had the pleasure of visiting you in your house outside
That's
Phnom
right,
Penh,
yeah.
and I recognize that the cover of the book again is something.
my house.
Yeah, it's your house looking out over the Mekong River.
Yeah.
I remember you were making sculpture. Is that right?
Yeah.
There were sculptures. It was a lush. 3-4 stories high. I remember going up on the top of it. It was quite an elaborate compound, it seemed to me. Well, yeah, and you have a room with your books, basically a library. Could you read A Wonderful Place for us?
Sure. A wonderful place. It is undeniable this place is wonderful. It is wonderful because we are here to tell it, and it would be wonderful without us. And though the most traveled of us still see only some portion, we suspect what we don't see is wonderful too. From this vantage, the part that can be seen has a river in it, and the river grows a garden from its bank toward a house. Though the garden is small, it has trees and flowers and someone who cares for them. When the air is warm and still, the river surface lies flat and seems not to move. On such days, a person might walk to the riverbank and throw a twig or spent flower into the water, which swiftly floats away south toward the sea. On days the wind comes heavy from the south, the waves push up, break back with a blow, and the great expanse of water, for as long as air insists, appears to flow north. It's a trick of the eye, not the water, which continues unfold in its single direction. This place exists out of its own urgency. A person could be forgiven for pausing here a while and taking some time to breathe in sunlight, listen to tailor birds dart from one tree to another, lay on a mat of grass with closed eyes, and imagine the turn of the world eddying away and all those who share the ride.
Wow, it's a beautiful ending. I was thinking back on my own experience of visiting you, there's an interesting sort of symbiotic and also vexed relationship between the United States and Cambodia. There's the Vietnam War, for instance, but the currency best loved in Cambodia is the American dollar, right? What's it like? How's your feeling as an American in Cambodia after all these years?
Well, despite what we did to Cambodia during the Vietnam War, which was, we bombed them and killed many people. Despite that, the Cambodians love Americans. They love the idea of America, and they love Americans. Many have family here who were refugees from that time. So as an American, I'm well regarded. Mm-hmm. That's pleasant.
Right.
It doesn't happen every place.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So I feel it's my home now. I've been there these 20 years, and I have my family is there.
Right.
I just mentioned them, and I'm feeling a little homesick already. Mm-hmm. Been here a month, and I'm starting to not be able to be anxious to get back.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think, someday I'm going to move back to America. This is Cambodia's your place.
Yeah, Cambodia's my place.
Yeah. There's a title poem, Still Life with Cambodia, I think that is evoking a little bit of Cambodian life and maybe life in your native Central Valley. The title poem for a book is always, to me, kind of extra important. What was it about Still Life with Coffee that made you think this is somehow the umbrella title for all these poems?
Well, I wrote it as kind of a way to understand something. Mm-hmm. That's what I write most of my poems, trying to understand something. And I can say, too, I don't really know where the poem is going to go when I start it. I have an idea where I think I want it to go, but sometime in there it changes places. Mm-hmm. You probably have that experience.
I do.
Yeah. And this poem, the title poem, Still Life with Coffee. I was doing what I do often, which I was sitting in a coffee house and trying to write something, and this is what I wanted to write about. Okay. I write slowly, I should tell you. So I didn't just write it in one full sitting, but I didn't know what it was going to be about until I got to the last half of it.
Okay.
Still Life with Coffee. Each new morning, you know less about morning. You become used to having something less to remember, a scrap of conviction turned into an empty space against your body, as though nothing was ever there. Perhaps nothing was there, ever. You are up early, the moon is up before you and full, though closing in on the trees behind your house as the sun rises opposite. A bird sings outside the window, the same bird, you're convinced, that has come every morning for years, a faithful and good companion who never tires of keeping a small chance open to teach a poor student with even poorer aptitude her song. I've grown old failing this music. Of course, it cannot be the same bird any more than the sun can be the same sun that let you down yesterday. You walk disappointment to Café Midi, where the intelligent tell each other their intelligence over words that rise above the tables, above the trees surrounding the tables, to the stars you do not see. Now you wait to know what happens next, when certainty is wiped of its last point, when the bird songs run out of breath, when the last cup cleared from the table. The future comes down to absence, something you live with like a bad choice. You have a story that explains absence, but you don't know it's true, and you don't know it's not true. All you know is what remains. The bird remains, the cafe full of talk, and morning remains, this morning, which becomes a tepid latte on a table, where you wait to get over it, where you wait to get it over. It's a myth to be happy. Be satisfied with that.
Mm-hmm. Though there's a line that's sticking with me from the poem. I've grown old failing that music, and you're talking about listening to the bird song. Is that kind of ars poetica, something that you're aspiring to reach, this sort of nonverbal music, or?
No, I think it really means that I haven't. I've grown old without understanding life,
Okay.
without understanding the world. I'm more confused now than when I was younger. That's for sure.
Is that because when I think of you and I think of reading your poems, I think of this is someone who might feign to be, confused or whatever, but in fact seems to be zeroing in on lots of important issues.
Well, there's lots of things I'm interested in,
Right.
And I really am interested in the big question,
Right.
why are we here? What is
Right.
this place? And I have now become more convinced with every passing year that I'm never going to have an
Right.
answer.
Yeah. There may not be one.
yeah, but may not.
Well, let me take you back in time a little bit, and you grew up in Armona, outside of Hanford, which is near Fresno.
Yes.
And you were a poet at Fresno State under the tutelage of Philip Levine, and then lots of great classmates. I think of Christopher Buckley, our friend, as one of them. Tell me a little bit about that.
Chris wasn't a classmate. He came as a teacher.
As a teacher, okay.
An lecturer for 2 or 3 years. Shared an office with Phil Levine, which is
Okay.
the connection there. And it would be a big stretch to call me a poet there. I loved poetry. I
Okay.
loved poetry for a long time.
What were
And-
you were taking poetry classes with those guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in my class, there were a number of people who gained bigger reputations, and one even became quite well known.
Who are you?
Larry Levis.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure that he was taking. I mean, he was there all the time,
Right.
but he may have finished already because there weren't that many poetry classes
Okay.
being offered, and this was his last year. It was my senior year,
Right.
in fact. It was a great education. I fell more in love with poetry, in that class, though I didn't feel that I was really writing up to the level that I aspired to. And it wasn't until much later, many years later, that I wrote something that I thought was good and have continued writing since then.
Was yours a home where there was a lot of poetry read? Was that part of
No,
it?
my parents were first-generation Americans. My grandparents were immigrants. And we had some books in the house, but not a lot. We were just simple people.
So how did poetry catch fire with you?
Well, I could turn the question on you. It's magic, really. Because poetry is such a minority art. Not too many people move into it. Nobody moves into it thinking they're going to get famous or wealthy.
Right.
Some spark hits you, and you feel you feel the beauty in the words. More than having something to say, you feel the beauty in the words, and that's what propels you.
Yeah, I would agree with that as a spark. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left, maybe a little bit less than that. I want to get at least a couple more poems in. You have a poem of teachers and poems on this very topic. Would you be willing to read that to us?
Sure. I would be willing to read the whole book to you. Of teachers and poems. Last night I chose a book of poems written by a friend to help me get to sleep. A testimony unlikely to become a blurb for his next one. I've had the book for months, looked at for a minute when gifted, then put aside to read later. Now, later, I read his elegant elegies to poets I also knew, teachers whose books I've turned to for repair many times. I never turned to their books for spiritual or moral guidance, or guidance of any kind outside literature. After all, I knew them, saw them in their petty failings, their moral stumbles, not much different nor egregious than my own. I also saw their generosity and kindness, their complexities and contradictions, their struggles to pull words together beyond what words know how to explain. Most writers think they have something important to say, but what they actually have gives voice to loneliness, not the emptiness of the indifferent, compassionless universe, though that certainly resonates with anyone paying attention, but the emptiness of words to describe how people feel. The full shelves where I keep my friends' eloquent verses attest to our failures to find rescue in careful words, to recover trust misplaced in the noble search. I learned from my teachers that artists don't embody their art. I learned that creators must work only for themselves. I learned that for writers, the desire to be read or perform must stay far below the desire to write. I learned that artists might make fabulous, if difficult, drinking buddies, but only their art stands a chance with time. I learned that the best parts of writing happen by accident, out of control, only recognized after surveying the damage. Making poems offers a respite from living, but offers life itself, a gracious gift we don't expect or deserve.
Wow. That poem should be emblazoned on the halls of every creative writing program in the country. That's great. And I love, too, the idea of poetry as accident, the best things happening, and that's
Right.
my experience as well. Let me keep you in Central California for a little bit longer. You're the oldest of 7 children. I think you have a poem, a family poem I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
Intricate intentions, I believe you said.
I dropped my marker, but I know where it is. It's just a little story of growing up in the Central Valley with my brothers. Intricate intentions. There are many nights like that at the end of those days. The summer heat dissipated into the darkening sky as I and my brothers lay on the hood of the family Chevy, the warmth of the engine still radiating onto our backs, while above us, above the unpolluted air, we watched the great swirls of our visible galaxy turn to a music too exquisite for ears and intentions too intricate for belief. Fields of corn grew not far away, and their grassy scent drifted into the evening breath. A dog barked somewhere, more decorous than purposeful, and talk among the brothers turned to television shows and ice cream before bed. If the stars were mentioned at all, it was only to try counting them out loud, an effort that quit almost as soon as it started. There was no thought that the world could be dangerous, though it was, or that the world had always been dangerous, which it had, or that it was born of the cast-off crumbs of creation, which it was, and which apparently derived from nothing. At some point, lying on a car starts to feel passé. The untroubled starscapes disappear into ambiguities, defined by numbers, calculations, vectors, and theories. The distant hums of summer nights, the smells of growing food bursting off the rich land, become abandoned in a hectic rush to find a small space to make ourselves visible to the world. Memory plays many tricks on the past, forgetting some things, making up others, and creating a direction, regardless, which permits passages from one day to one day. I want to tell you a story of solidarity and beauty and purpose that have placed us, all of us, into a complicated, uncertain, ultimately sustaining narrative where everyone sings and dances and turns into smiles. We all come out as heroes. Sometimes we see this in each other, that we are not separate at all. But most days, it's hard to find harmonies. We mainly see troubles of the heavens as inseparable from troubles of earth. The sky no longer exists as a place of refuge and reassurance, like in the days when the story was only brothers lying next to each other in clean, balmy air, not one of whom could have thought, they watched the universe. They were simply looking at stars, all of the stars.
Beautiful ending. What do your siblings think about their big brother, the poet, and that as your sort of chosen vocation?
They have all my books. I don't know if they've read any of the poems. I grew up in a very loving family. I didn't have a dysfunctional family. I think because my parents were still a little bit in the old world, having been raised by my grandparents who were immigrants. So, and I was the oldest, and in my family that makes you special, in a way that's a good way. And my siblings have always considered me that way, and in anything I've done, like writing poems, they just say, "Oh, that's just David."
But they're proud of you.
Yeah, I think they are.
They may be watching the show.
We're proud of each other, and
great.
we have good relationships with each other.
That's great. Well, we just have a couple of minutes left. I before we get to your last short poem, your voice is so clearly and fully your own. I hesitate to ask this question, but who have been influences on you as a poet over the years?
Well, Philip Levine for sure.
Right.
He was my great teacher. He was a great teacher. He was a difficult critic. I mean, he didn't tolerate people. Yeah, he didn't tolerate people who were doing not working to their capacity, and he was very frank in the classroom. So, yeah, without doubt, he is the great influence, and we remain friends, through all the years after. Well, I admire, some of the greats of the past. And I'm thinking now, well, there's too many really, but of the recent present, I would say a big influence has been Van Bolen. She's an Irish poet.
Right.
And her work is heavenly. To me, it's
really
like
is,
heaven
yeah.
sent.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, beautiful language in that Irish tradition, Larry Levis, who had been a classmate of mine, he created a new kind of poetry. And, toward the end of his life, he was writing this new kind of poetry that has been an influence on me and everybody who ever met him. Yeah.
Well, let's finish up, if we could, with a complete history of work.
Yeah, the complete history of work. You shouldn't worry. It's not very long poem. It takes a lot of work to get things done, and a lot of skill to get them done right. Skill most workers do not have, so the work rarely turns out well. But then again, as well as expected.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, David Oliveira, thank you so very much for being on the creative community and bringing us back from 2.5 years of pandemic absence. It's been great to hear your poems and to talk to you.
Thank you, David. This has been a pleasure, and I thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, the creative community is produced by CAPS Media and TVSB, a co-production. It's also generously funded by the Diana and Simon Robb Foundation. I'm your host, David Starkey, and we'll see you next time.